Hi, everybody. Good to see you all. Nice. It's like I haven't seen you in a while. We have seen each other on the train and the bus, I mean. I want to start off. I have some incredible folks that I want to introduce you to that you're going to be seeing a lot more of in the next coming years. So I'll start on the far left there. We've got from Nanaimo Ladysmith, Lisa Marie Barron. Really excited to have you on the team, and she'll be someone you'll be seeing a lot of. Next, we have Blake Desjardins from Edmonton Griesbach. Again, someone I'm hoping you'll get to know. An incredible new set of MPs that I want to introduce to you. Laurie Idlout from Nunavut. Thank you so much for being here, Laurie. And Bonita Zurillo from Port Moody Coquitlam. We've got some great folks that I just wanted to introduce you all to, and I wanted you to get to see them. Today, I want to chat about a couple of things. First off, I want to outline some of the things that were our priorities now coming out of our caucus meeting yesterday and the discussions that we've had, as well as what our priorities given the realities that we're up against. There are some immediate things that the Liberal government can do if they want to signal that they want to work with us. Our priorities have remained the same. We want to help people out. And right now, people are still dealing with the immediate threat of the pandemic, and they need help right now. So there's some things that this Liberal government could do if they're interested in helping people. We know that people are desperate for help in Alberta and Saskatchewan. We need to see steps, proactive steps to help those people out. That means supporting frontline healthcare workers. That means making sure our healthcare is invested in to help those folks provide the care necessary, because there are some really desperate people and some really desperate and painful stories that we're hearing from people around the fact that they can't get the care they need because of the Conservative government that starved them of funding, and because of subsequent federal, Liberal and Conservative governments that have starved the federal transfers so that provinces aren't getting enough. So we need to see some action on that. We need to see some immediate actions on the things that Mr. Trudeau has promised to do a bunch of times and hasn't really delivered on. He's just kind of re-promised them. He promised to make sure that domestic travel would require proof of vaccination. That is something that he mentioned months ago, and it's still not in place. So again, he's floated the idea further and has not actually done anything to make it happen. So we need concrete steps to make sure that people are getting supported to get through the pandemic. We believe strongly in a federal passport, a federal vaccine passport, a document that could be used for interprovincial travel, to travel domestically, and something that would allow people to have proof that could be used everywhere in Canada and make it easier for people to show proof of vaccination. That's something that was floated in the past. Mr. Trudeau talked about it, but has not yet done it. And so we're saying, let's see some action on these things. These things would certainly help us get through the pandemic, and it would help a lot of people out. We've been demanding paid sick leave expanded for 18 months. Repeatedly, 22 times in the last parliament, I said we need to expand it. And then in the midst of the election, Mr. Trudeau said, okay, we'll bring in 10 days mandated federally paid sick leave. Well, let's see that happen. In addition, he promised to work with provinces to deliver a program that works across Canada. Let's see that as well. These are some concrete steps that we could do that would help us deal with the pandemic and would show that he's interested in doing something that's going to help people out and something that we would work together on. And so those are some immediate steps. We also know that for New Democrats, we're unequivocal on this. We want to see justice for Indigenous people. One immediate concrete step, something that could happen right now, is Mr. Trudeau could finally stop the court case against Indigenous children. There's been ruling after ruling from the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal, and now another decision in the courts that said very clearly that appealing it, there's no ground to appeal it. So stop the legal battles and just follow through on the court order, and let's see some justice. That's just a starting point. There's so much more that we need to do, but let's stop those legal battles. That would be another sign that this Liberal government's interested in working with us, and it would signal to us interest in working together. And that's what we want to see. We want to see commitments that are concrete, that will make life better for people, where we can see that there is interest in working. And this doesn't require throne speech. This doesn't require a budget. These are immediate steps that can be taken. In terms of the throne speech or other areas of interest that we want to work together on, the Liberals know where we stand, but we want to see real concrete action on the climate crisis. This is something that is vital to so many people. So many of my MPs have stories from their ridings of how important it is to people in their ridings. And we've seen the impacts of the climate crisis in such an immediate way, in the sense of the forest fires that have ravaged Canada from coast to coast. We've seen flooding, we've seen extreme weather, hot temperatures, and so we need to see action on the climate crisis. We also want to see steps to move forward on childcare. This is something that remains a priority for New Democrats. And we also want to see a plan that helps create good jobs for those workers in resource sectors. And these are some of our priorities, and we want to see the government move on those. Donc, je veux aujourd'hui parler de si le gouvernement libéral veut travailler avec nous, on a besoin des signes qu'ils sont prêts de travailler ensemble et des signes qui montrent qu'ils ont les mêmes valeurs ou des objectifs qui sont similaires à les nôtres. Donc, quelque chose que le gouvernement peut faire maintenant, tout de suite, sans avoir un discours de trône, des choses le gouvernement peut montrer maintenant, tout de suite, sont d'arrêter les poursuites en justice contre la communauté autochtone, les enfants autochtones. Après la décision du Cour de justice dans le cas de l'appel de la décision décision du tribunal des droits de la personne du Canada, après tout ça, c'est clair qu'ils n'ont pas un cas contre ces enfants et ils doivent tout de suite arrêter la poursuite contre ces enfants. En plus, il y a plusieurs des choses que le gouvernement peut faire tout de suite pour aider les gens qui ont toujours dans un péril de la 4e vague de la COVID-19 pour aider les gens, pour combattre cette 4e vague. Donc, on a demandé à plusieurs reprises, 22 fois dans les derniers 18 mois, qu'on doit avoir une expansion du programme de congé des maladies payées. Et 22 fois, M. Trudeau a dit non. Donc, s'il veut travailler ensemble, il a l'opportunité maintenant de mettre en œuvre une expansion, de faire ce qu'il a promis de faire pendant les élections, de mettre en œuvre un projet de loi pour, au niveau fédéral, d'avoir 10 journées de congé des maladies payées. On peut commencer avec ça, ça montre le leadership. Mais aussi, il a promis de travailler avec les provinces et territoires pour mettre en œuvre un programme national, un programme qui fonctionne à travers le pays. Donc, n'importe quelle sorte de programme, on veut voir que tous les Canadiens et Canadiennes ont accès à un programme qui leur donne l'opportunité de rester chez eux quand ils tombent malades. Donc, ça, c'est quelque chose qui peut aider dans la bataille contre la COVID-19 et c'est quelque chose qui peut vraiment aider les gens en général. Donc, ça, c'est quelque chose que le gouvernement peut montrer tout de suite et ça peut montrer qu'ils sont prêts de travailler ensemble avec nous. Finalement, quelque chose qui frappe vraiment fort tout le pays et tous les gens sont inquiets, c'est la crise climatique. Donc, on veut voir des engagements pour faire face à la crise climatique. Ça peut aussi montrer que le gouvernement est prêt de travailler ensemble avec nous. Comme on a dit, notre but, c'est d'aider les gens. Ça, c'est notre priorité. C'était toujours notre priorité. Et dans ce gouvernement minoritaire, les gens ont décidé d'avoir un gouvernement minoritaire. Notre travail, c'est de s'assurer que ce gouvernement fonctionne pour les gens. Donc, ça, c'est ce qu'on veut voir. Et le gouvernement a une opportunité maintenant de montrer qu'ils sont prêts de faire ça. Le service de garde, c'est toujours une priorité pour nous. Donc, on veut voir que le gouvernement libéral continue de créer, de signer des accords ou de faire le travail nécessaire pour réaliser un tel programme et pour aider les gens qui ont toujours besoin de plus d'accès. Au Québec, c'est toujours un enjeu. On a un programme incroyable, mais il y a un manque des espaces pour les familles. Donc, on veut régler ça. On veut aller de l'avant avec ce programme. Aussi, finalement, comme j'ai dit, pour nous, c'est important de voir des actions concrètes pour la justice pour la communauté autochtone. Donc, on peut voir si le gouvernement est prêt de prendre des mesures spécifiques. C'est quelque chose qui peut montrer qu'ils sont prêts de travailler avec nous et on est ouvert. Donc, avec ça, merci encore. Je veux remercier mes députés. Je l'ai introduit en anglais, je l'ai fait encore en français. Pour Nanaimo Lady Smith, on a Lisa Marie Barron. Ici, on a Blake Desjardins pour Edmonton Griesbach. Puis pour Nunavut, Laurie Idlaut. Et puis Bonita Zurella pour Moody Kukulum. Merci beaucoup. And with that, I'm ready for any questions you might have.
Et nous allons maintenant prendre les questions, commençons par les questions au téléphone. Comme à l'habitude, une question de suivi. We will now take questions, starting with questions on the phone. As usual, one question, one follow-up per reporter. Operator, do we have a first question?
Thank you. Merci. Please press star one at this time if you have a question. S'il vous plaît, appuyez sur étoile maintenant pour poser une question. And the first question is from David Turton from CBC News. Please go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Singh. Good morning. It's very good to see you. My question to you is this. You know, you called September's election results for your party disappointing. What is your party going to do to formally review those results? As you know, the Conservatives have committed to doing a formal review. They're going to, have a former MP lead that, and they are going to share those findings, of course, with their caucus. Is the NDP going to do the same thing?
Thanks so much for the question. I want to be clear. I'm very proud of the campaign that we ran, and I'm proud of how we used our campaign to talk to people that were feeling like they didn't matter. We talked to healthcare workers who were feeling left behind and unseen. We talked to Indigenous communities and lifted up the voices of people who were saying we have been ignored by the federal government. And we spent time to make sure people didn't forget the unmarked graves and the Indigenous children that have been stripped from their families because of residential schools. So we're proud of the campaign we ran. I'm disappointed, though, that we didn't get more of these incredible MPs, these candidates that could have become MPs. I am disappointed about that, and I wish we could have brought more of them to Ottawa. There were so many close election calls where Ottawa and Canada and those ridings missed out on some really incredible people. And so I'm certainly disappointed by that. We announced yesterday to some of the media that were present at the first caucus meeting that we'll be doing our own review, and it's head by Bob Dewar, and that's someone who's been involved in a lot of really successful New Democrat campaigns. And the review will be to find out ways where we can close those gaps and make sure we bring those great New Democrat NDP candidates into MPs and bring them to Ottawa so they can fight for people. And so we'll be doing that, and there's a team of folks that'll be involved in that, and we'll be sharing those details with our caucus once we obtain the results.
Okay, thank you so much for answering that question so clearly. I'm going to move on to a totally different topic. My colleague Jason Warwick is reporting today that Jody Wilson-Raybould wasn't consulted on freeing the Catholic Church from its residential school compensation obligations. So that's the headline. Basically, the then Justice Minister wasn't informed about freeing the Catholic Church from its residential school compensation obligation. So my question to you, and maybe to any of the other new MPs who are gathered there, if they'd like to chime in, what does this say about how seriously this government was in taking and holding the Catholic Church to account?
It shows that they weren't serious about it, and that was wrong. And it also shows they didn't reach out to the Justice Minister, an Indigenous woman of great respect and renown across Canada, an advocate, that they wouldn't consult someone of their own cabinet. Shows that they aren't taking this seriously. And sadly, I think there's many examples of how Mr. Trudeau and his government aren't taking reconciliation seriously. We've just got a couple of days ago a recent example as well. This is serious stuff. This is life or death. We've got people that are still reeling from the trauma of these residential schools. And to this day, no one's been brought to justice. But we've been calling for a special prosecutor for that very reason. These are crimes committed. These are crimes committed against Indigenous people. And there is yet to be anyone that's held accountable. The Catholic Church is absolutely responsible. There's no question about it. And this Liberal government's not doing enough to ensure that they are also contributing fairly in compensating fairly. They are responsible as well. And this Liberal government is not taking this seriously, and they're not pursuing justice in a way that recognizes and respects the trauma and the pain of Indigenous people. I want you to know you can count on us to do that. We're going to continue to fight for you.
Operator, next question.
Thank you. Merci. La prochaine question est de Louis Blouin, Radio-Canada. La parole est à vous.
Bonjour, M. Singh.
Bonjour.
Je veux revenir sur l'élection. Le NPD a dépensé beaucoup plus d'argent qu'en 2019 et vous n'avez obtenu qu'un siège de plus. Je suis conscient que vous allez mener votre propre évaluation de ce qui s'est passé, mais vous, personnellement, comme chef, j'aimerais savoir s'il y a des choses que vous avez identifiées que vous-même, comme chef, vous auriez aimé faire différemment pendant cette campagne-là.
Merci pour la question. On est tellement fiers de la campagne de ce qu'on a fait. Je suis fier qu'on a utilisé notre plateforme pour donner une voix aux gens qui étaient pas entendus, des travailleurs de première ligne en santé qui étaient ignorés. On a donné une plateforme pour partager leurs histoires. On a des travailleurs de première ligne à travers le pays à ce moment qui sont frustrés, qui ont travaillé tellement dur contre cette pandémie et on a eu une chance de partager leur histoire. On a parlé avec les communautés autochtones. On a utilisé notre plateforme pour montrer comment il y a toujours des communautés autochtones qui n'ont pas accès à l'eau potable. Donc, je suis tellement fier et je pense que c'était une bonne dépense de nos ressources de partager les histoires des Canadiens et Canadiennes, de parler aux jeunes, de parler de comment on peut faire face à la crise climatique, de comment on peut investir dans nos soins de santé et comment on peut faire face à la crise du logement. Donc, je suis tellement fier du travail qu'on a fait et l'importance de ce travail. Et je suis toujours ouvert de trouver des façons comment on peut améliorer notre campagne, de comment on peut réussir à avoir plus de sièges, parce que je crois profondément que plus de sièges néo-démocrates va dire que les gens vont avoir plus d'aide, parce que c'est nous qui vont dire que les autres-riches doivent payer le juste part pour investir dans nos soins de santé, pour investir dans une assurance médicaments universelle, pour investir dans les programmes sociaux, pour bâtir des maisons sociaux et abordables. Donc, je crois profondément dans l'importance d'avoir plus de sièges néo-démocrates et je suis fier du travail qu'on a fait et que j'ai fait personnellement comme chef. Mais on va faire une analyse de ce qui s'est passé pour savoir comment on peut améliorer les résultats dans l'avenir.
Je voudrais vous entendre sur un autre sujet, sur la vaccination obligatoire des députés aux communes. À votre sens, est-ce que les gens qui se présentent en personne aux communes devraient être vaccinés? Quelle est votre position là-dessus?
Oui, je pense qu'il doit être vacciné.
And we'll now take questions from the room. Nous allons maintenant prendre des questions de la salle. Ashley?
Hi, Mr. Singh. It's Annie Bertrand-Oliver with C2 National News.
Hey there.
All good. Part of your caucus meeting yesterday was talking to your new caucus about what went well, what didn't go well in the campaign. I'm wondering what kind of feedback you heard, and why do you believe that the party only gained one more seat than in 2019?
So, yeah, we talked a lot about some feedback around the campaign, and we heard that the national campaign went really well. We were able to connect with lots of folks and share the stories, like I mentioned, the stories of frontline healthcare workers, of Indigenous people. We spoke to young people about how we could tackle the climate crisis, and we talked about how we could invest in our healthcare and make sure that it's there for people when they need it. So there's a lot of good feedback around that, and people felt supported nationally with the national campaign. One of the things that we identified that we need to do more work is, on the ground. There's a lot of races where we're very, very close, about 12 seats where we're within 1 or 2% of the vote. And there's some work that needs to be done on the ground. And so that's part of the analysis that we'll be doing to get more details around what we can do to improve that. And I look forward to that. I want to find ways where we can win more seats because I really believe, I believe very deeply in my heart, Canadians are better served when there's more New Democrats elected. We fight for you, we stand up for you, and people have shown in this election that they have increased support for us because they believe that we've been there for them.
You talk about the ground game, so that actually goes into my next question. There has been some criticism that the party spent too much money on the Leaders campaign and on making sure that your image was out there on every platform and didn't funnel enough of the money into the local riding associations to help improve their ground game. Do you believe that this was a factor?
Well, I think that there is more that we can do on the ground, and we'll figure out exactly what that looks like and what the most effective way to do that with the review that we're doing. I think that'll help uncover specifically what we need to do. Because I really, like I said, we've got these great 4 MPs with me today, and I hope in the future to have many more to show to you, because you'll see the difference. When people in their communities elect New Democrats, they feel a difference. When it comes to getting help in their constituencies, New Democrats provide better help. When it comes to speaking up for people's needs, New Democrats fight harder. And I believe that, and I know that because we're focused on people. And so I want to get more New Democrats elected because I know they'll fight for you and they'll lift you up.
Prochaine question, Raymond.
Bonjour, M. Singh, Raymond Filion de TVA.
Bonjour.
Content de vous voir. J'aimerais revenir sur le voyage de M. Trudeau à Tofino. Il a fait un acte de contrition hier, mais là, ce matin, on apprend que la luxueuse résidence où il a siégé appartient à l'épouse d'un homme d'affaires qui a été nommé en 2017 dans les Paradise Papers, en lien avec les paradis fiscaux. On ne veut pas nous dire combien le premier ministre a payé pour ce séjour dans cette luxueuse résidence. J'aimerais savoir ce que vous en pensez de cette situation-là.
Je pense que c'est un autre niveau de comment M. Trudeau a des mauvaises priorités. Donc, ça, c'est un autre niveau. Mais si je réponds à cette question, je dois souligner, c'est vraiment, pour moi, l'impact sur la communauté autochtone qui est primordial. Parce que c'était la première fois dans l'histoire de notre pays de commémorer une telle journée, une journée pour la réconciliation, pour la vérité. Et le fait qu'elle a choisi pour la première fois dans notre pays qu'on a eu une journée comme ça, une journée grave et sérieuse, le fait qu'elle a choisi cette journée par exprès, parce que c'est une première ministre, elle a planifié cette date depuis, on pense, longtemps. Et le fait qu'elle a choisi cette date par exprès, la première fois qu'on commémore une journée pour la réconciliation, et comment ça a blessé la communauté autochtone. Pour moi, ça, c'est la pire chose. Ça a blessé les gens parce qu'ils veulent voir des changements concrets et ils ont toujours la trauma causée par les pensionnats. Et le fait qu'il a fait ça a vraiment blessé les gens. Et pour moi, ça, c'est ce qui était pire. Mais vous avez soulevé les autres niveaux de comment c'était une mauvaise décision. Mais pour moi, ça, c'est primordial. En anglais. Bien fait en français. Hein? You've raised another level of how this was an example of Mr. Trudeau's bad decision and bad priorities. The fact that there's some layers around the owner and connection with the Paradise Papers. But for me, the most important thing to highlight of Mr. Trudeau's decision to choose that day, the first day in the history of our country, for the first time ever where we're commemorating a day, a national day of truth and reconciliation, to choose that day to have planned, and we know this is the Prime Minister, so he would have planned this well in advance, to plan expressly, particularly to go on that day, the first day ever that we were commemorating this day, to go on vacation, sends a message that was really hurtful to Indigenous people because Indigenous people still feel the trauma of residential schools. They still feel the pain. And there is so much hope, though, in reconciliation because we've seen so many people come together and say, we've got to do something to right this wrong. I've met so many people who care deeply about making sure that we walk the path of justice. And for the Prime Minister to choose that day to leave, to go on vacation on a day that should have been a solemn and serious day, was a message that was really hurtful to Indigenous people. And that, to me, is the worst part of it all.
Mais, outre le choix de la date pour le voyage, M. Trudeau a fait son acte de contrition, comme je l'ai dit. Ma question porte spécifiquement sur l'endroit où il a séjourné, cette fameuse maison, comme vous dites, liée d'une certaine façon aux Paradise Papers. Qu'est-ce que ça soulève, selon vous, comme question, ce choix d'endroit et le fait qu'on refuse de nous dire combien le premier ministre a déboursé pour ça?
Et je pense que... Et moi, j'ai évité un peu de parler de cette question directement parce que j'ai voulu premièrement parler de l'impact sur la communauté autochtone. Et ça, c'est moi toujours, ça c'est la question primordiale. Mais il y a une arrogance des décisions de M. Trudeau parce que on ne peut pas oublier le fait qu'il était l'un des premiers premiers ministres qui a été trouvé en contre les droits éthiques avec ce qui s'est passé avec Aga Khan. Donc, dans toute cette situation de connaître qu'il était le premier qui a brisé la loi, en effet, avec ça, le fait qu'il il a choisi cet endroit encore, ça montre une arrogance. Aussi, quand on a dit qu'on doit faire payer le juste part des ultra-riches, le fait qu'il est mêlé avec les ultra-riches. On ne sait pas comment et on ne sait pas les détails, mais on sait en général, il est proche des ultra-riches. Et peut-être ça, c'est pourquoi il a toujours opposé des mesures de faire payer le juste part des ultra-riches. Donc, ça montre encore une amitié, une relation proche des ultra-riches. Et ça montre effectivement de quel bord ils se battent. Et souvent, il a dit ça pendant la campagne électorale, on ne peut pas poursuivre les ultra-riches avec unlimited zeal. Et on a dit, oui, on peut et on doit le faire. Les gens demandent ça. Donc, je pense que ça montre encore ses priorités et la contraste avec mes priorités.
Next question, Hayden.
Hi there, Aidan Shamandi from iPolitics. So you laid out your priorities in front of caucus yesterday and in front of us today, and a couple weeks ago, the Prime Minister did the same. And there's a lot of overlap, at least in the broad strokes, in terms of what you guys want to address. But I'm wondering, given what was in your platform and what was in their platform, there were some pretty stark differences in terms of how you want to approach those issues. So when it comes to things like climate change or housing or reconciliation, when these issues come up for debate and votes in Parliament, how far are you willing to go to kind of get your way? Are you willing to, like, no bill is better than a bad bill?
The big difference for us is we want to get things done. And Liberals seem to, they want to campaign on things, they want to promise things, and they don't want to deliver on them. And so for us, we're not gonna take the pretty words or the nice words for granted. We're not gonna say, okay, you talked about it, that's good enough. Oh, it looks like you care about the same things as us, good enough. We have seen what happens when we take that approach. Mr. Trudeau promised pharmacare really clearly, campaigned on it really clearly, put it in the throne speech. And it turned out they were just all words, because when the first opportunity came to actually vote on it in a concrete way, and I want to remind folks that we used the language directly lifted from the government's own commissioned report on how to bring in pharmacare. One of those steps was to bring in a Pharmacare Act, modeled after the same principles in the Canada Health Act. We put that exactly into law. And that proposal was rejected. The Liberals voted against it with the Conservatives. And so I am very skeptical about the words and the promises of Mr. Trudeau and the Liberals, because they don't follow through. And so what I want to see is real concrete actions. And that's why I laid out not just the broad strokes, things that I want to see, but some real immediate steps, because there are immediate steps we can see right now. You know, in addition to some of the ones I laid out, another immediate step, right now there are seniors that receive GIS, the Guaranteed Income Supplement, who are having their GIS clawed back right now. These are some of the most vulnerable seniors. There is a minor change that would mean that these seniors, who are amongst the most economically desperate, would no longer have their GIS clawed back. And just to put that into context, having their GIS clawed back means that some of these seniors might end up on the streets. Some of our elders might not be able to afford the homes that they live in, their apartments that they live in. They will not afford them if they lose their GIS. That's another concrete step that Liberals can take. So I want to see movement right now immediately on paid sick leave. I want to see movement on stopping the clawback for these seniors so that they can actually live in dignity. I want to see immediate steps to stop fighting Indigenous kids in court. These are some immediate things that the government can do if they want to show that they're really interested in working for people. And if they do that, they can count on my support.
So, like, would you be willing to withhold your votes if the proposed bill isn't up to your standards?
Absolutely. We've withheld our votes in the past, and we're prepared to do that again. We want to help people, and we want to see concrete steps that will help people.
Next question.
Hi, good morning. Christy Kirkup from the Globe and Mail. Hi. So in terms of working with the government, you talked about sending a signal as to what you would like to see. Have there been any negotiations with the government or an olive branch extended by the Prime Minister to work with you and talk to you about fundamentally getting things done in Parliament?
No.
And what do you think about that? Is that problematic? I do have another question, though, I'd like to ask, so I'm not trying to burn two with your one-word response.
Fine. I just wanted to, seriously, they haven't reached out. And they haven't signaled that they want to negotiate or talk so far. And that's fine. I'm not concerned because they know where we stand. It's like we've campaigned on where we stand for the past 36 plus days. So they know where I stand. And again, I've laid it out again today, so they know where I stand. And I look forward to them signaling their interest by doing any of these things. We've talked about how it's important to extend the help for people. We were the ones that fought back a number of times when CERB was being cut. We said, don't cut it. And they were going to discontinue supports for people. We said, it's got to continue. That's another concrete thing that we could see. If they are interested in working with us, they could continue the support that people need, because we're still in a fourth wave. This fourth wave is the worst it's ever been for people in Alberta and Saskatchewan. So it is vital that the supports that are in place now continue. So they're kind of discussing and pondering whether to extend it or not. We would say extend it. And if they extend it, that's another signal that they're showing to us that they're listening to what we've been calling for.
I did want to ask you about the emergency support. So we know that they're due to run up at the end of the month on the 23rd, specifically for businesses and individuals. The Liberals have been promising a narrow extension of benefits targeting businesses in the tourism sector, yesterday giving the signal that they're exploring options. I'm wondering, does the NDP support a targeted approach to only support hardest hit business sectors, or are you looking for broad business benefits for businesses and individuals to continue?
We want to see the supports continue. As I outlined, we're in the worst of it right now for Alberta and Saskatchewan. This is the worst it's ever been. So in the worst that it's ever been, it would be irresponsible and wrong to cut the help to people. So absolutely, we want to see a broad continuing of support. But the only tailoring of that support that we envision is that the support should go to people for sure and to small businesses. They've been the hardest hit, and we don't want to see support continue for the large corporations that have been able to get through this time with, in fact, doing really well. So we want to see a tailored approach to small businesses, but we want to see the wage subsidy and the rental subsidy continue for these small businesses, particularly given the impact of the fourth wave and how serious it's been, and how there is a potential for things to get worse. So we want to see those supports continue. And that would be another sign that the Liberal government is interested in working with us, because they would be listening to our clear demand, which is to continue the supports for people and for small businesses.
I'll check one more time before coming back to the room if we have a question on the phone. Opératrice, avons-nous une question téléphone?
Thank you, merci. Donc, la prochaine question, Hélène Bozzetti, les coops de l'information, à vous la parole.
Oui, bonjour, M. Singh. Je ne veux pas être désagréable, mais je vous écoute à distance et je vous entends beaucoup renifler. Je me demande, est-ce que vous avez un rhume? Est-ce que vous avez passé un test de dépistage de la COVID avant de venir participer à une rencontre en personne avec vos députés?
Oui. Et le test était négatif.
OK. Dans ce meeting, c'était la première réunion du caucus. Il faut d'habitude faire les votes sur la loi de M. Chong, là, vous savez. Est-ce que le caucus NPD s'est donné ces pouvoirs-là? Et je voulais savoir aussi, ce rapport de M. Doer dont vous avez parlé, est-ce qu'il sera rendu public? Merci.
Pour la première question, oui, on l'a fait. On a fait les votes de Chong. Et le parti a voté contre tous les votes. Et puis, deuxièmement, non, ça va rester des avis ou des conseils pour nos députés et pour notre parti.
Opératrice, avons-nous une dernière question au téléphone?
Thank you, merci. So the next question from Tom Koski, the Black Lux reporter. Please go ahead.
Mr. Singh, I want to ask about a very practical matter on this business of horse trading votes in the minority parliament that other reporters have mentioned. The Liberal Party platform said there was one reference that they would ban replacement workers in the federally regulated private sector. Members of your caucus, I think, have introduced that bill some 14 times. Presumably, Cabinet cannot pass a budget without your votes. Would you instruct them that on a do-it-or-else basis, the Canada Labour Code should be amended in any omnibus budget bill to ban replacement workers in the federally regulated private sector?
Thank you for the question. As you noted, this is something that is a long-standing principle of New Democrats. We are against replacement workers. We've tabled what's been known as colloquially as anti-scab legislation many times, and we will continue to fight for that. The federal government, if they want to get it done and they need the votes, of course they do, because we're in a minority government, we would make sure that that passes. We would want to see that happen. That's something that's a priority for us, and it's long been a priority for us. We've long believed that these replacement workers undermine the ability for workers to negotiate fairly, to be able to use their ability to protest or to strike as a tool to negotiate unfair conditions. And so we have long made this a principle, and it remains a principle for us.
So I want to be sure that I understand, and if I'm incorrect, please do correct me. In the 43rd Parliament, you had said that you would not withhold any vote, I'm paraphrasing, that would trigger a pandemic election, but you wound up with a pandemic election anyway. I have the impression from you today that you are saying you will take every cabinet bill on a vote-by-vote basis, including a budget bill. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
And we're back to the room.
Good morning, Raquel Fletcher with Global News. I also have a question about the COVID benefits that can be rolled over for one more month before they expire. I'm wondering what kind of pressure your party plans to or can put on the government to recall Parliament quicker in order to extend these benefits.
Thank you for the question. My understanding is these benefits can be extended without Parliament being recalled. And so that's another reason why we're saying that would be a signal to us in terms of what would show a willingness for us to support legislation in the future, support a throne speech. I'm not worried that they haven't reached out. Earlier question was raised, have they reached out? And I said, no, I'm not worried about that, because we've laid out some of our concerns and our priorities, and the government can choose to work with those or not. One of those would be to continue the supports, and they can do that without recalling Parliament. So that would be another indication of their willingness to work with us. And it would signal seeing an extension of the supports for people and for workers and for small businesses would also go in the direction of securing our support for a potential throne speech. So we want to see these steps that we've outlined, these first steps that can be taken. And if any of them are moved on, it would be a positive signal.
You've mentioned Alberta and Saskatchewan, what's going on there a couple times this morning. You also mentioned at the beginning of your speech federal health transfers. How, and of course, Mr. Trudeau has not committed to increasing the transfers to what the premiers have asked for. How much of what we're seeing in the West right now it can be, or in your mind, is in direct correlation to the health transfers?
Thank you for the question. So first and foremost, it's a direct result of these conservative premiers who are making horrible decisions, and that can't be ignored. And I think it would be unfair to ignore that reality. Both Jason Kenney and Scott Moe are making horrible decisions, and they are doing it purposefully, and that's putting people's lives at risk. They are cutting healthcare. They are fighting with frontline healthcare workers, and it is wrong. And that needs to be said. In addition, though, there is no question that the cut of healthcare funding at the federal level over decades has contributed to this problem. There's no question about that. It has starved the provincial healthcare systems of funding. It has directly contributed to the problems that we're up against right now in healthcare. There's no question about that. So I would say certainly it starts with it is a provincial matter, and these provincial governments are doing a horrible job, but there's no denying that the federal government, Harper's cuts that were continued by Justin Trudeau, have contributed to the problem that we're seeing right now in Alberta and Saskatchewan, and frankly, across Canada. The federal government has a role to play and has contributed to the problem by cutting the transfers over the past number of decades.
And the last question in the room. La dernière question sera dans la salle.
Hi, Mari Wolf from the Canadian Press.
Hi there.
Hi, can I ask could you say more about the circumstances under which you might withhold votes in a parliament, and also are there any red lines that might actually lead you to not supporting a budget?
We have not outlined any red lines at this point, so I can say there's not anything that we've outlined yet. And in terms of withholding votes. We want to do what's in the interest of Canadians. We're going to fight for Canadians every step of the way. We're going to fight for the things that we've outlined, the help that people need, whether it's fighting the climate crisis, fight to make sure we're reducing our emissions, fight to create good jobs, making sure we invest in healthcare, and some of those immediate things we said, continuing the help for workers and for small businesses, making sure paid sick leave is moved forward, making sure that the end to the clawbacks on the GIS, these are things that are immediate things. And we are prepared to withhold our votes. And so that's why we're calling on the government to show that they're interested in working together.
And this concludes the press conference. Ceci met fin la conférence de presse. Merci.
Thanks so much. And a big thank you to my MPs for being here. That's amazing. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Thank you.